Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing how to get a stubborn ex back. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast, and today we are discussing how to get a stubborn ex back. So if you've been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you might feel disheartened if you believe your ex is stubborn. How can things be sorted out if they are awkward, avoidant, or just plain stubborn? In today's podcast, I'll be explaining 3 steps to increase the chance of you getting your stubborn ex back. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is solve the problems. So when you were dumped, you may have been told why the relationship has ended. Now, some of you unfortunately will not be told anything at all, and you'll be completely blindsided, whereas others of you will actually be told a reason or reasons. Now, to muddy the waters further, what you were told is not necessarily completely accurate or the complete story. But whether or not you were told something, whether you were told nothing at all, whether you believe what they are saying, what I suggest you do is post-breakup, have a real deep think about what exactly, in your opinion, went wrong. Maybe you will agree with what your ex said. Maybe you won't. Maybe they didn't say anything anyway. But it's vitally important that you solve this first problem. And this is trying to uncover why your ex-dumper lost romantic emotional attraction. Now, for a relationship to end, one person needs to lose romantic emotional attraction. And when it hits the necessary low point, this is when they action the breakup. Now, they don't lose attraction for no reason. Your ex-dumper didn't become your ex-dumper for no reason at all. Unfortunately, they lost romantic emotional attraction. And it's up to you to try and solve this first problem. Why did they lose this attraction? Was it for one reason? Was it for multiple reasons? Was it obvious? Was it unclear? Think about it long and hard. Try and uncover, by being honest with yourself and very self-reflective, what potentially went wrong. Look at the relationship from your ex's perspective rather than yours. Try and look through it using their eyes. Maybe you need to ask friends or family. Maybe you want to speak with myself about it. Whatever you decide to do, have a big, deep think. You've got time. Now, as a dumpee, one of the only things you might feel you have going for you right now is more time to do more things. And if you believe that, then you need to be using it in a productive way. And one of the productive things you could be doing is trying to solve this first important problem. What went wrong? Okay, now when you come to a conclusion of what you think may have gone wrong, this is when you now need to solve further problems. And when I say solve further problems, we're talking about trying to fix the problems. Because if your ex-dumper contacts you in the future, you might only get one chance to try and rectify the relationship. What I've seen from stubborn exes is that if they do make contact, often there's only 1, maybe 2 opportunities to try and rectify something before they believe that they were on their own right path before they actually turned back and reached out to you. Meaning, if you have a truly stubborn ex, if you have an ex who has an avoidant attachment style, I don't believe it reduces the chance of you hearing from them, but it might reduce the chance of how many chances you're going to get to try and rectify things. So right now you have time. Right now you can be trying to solve the problems of your relationship. And this is why I want you to think about it very clearly, because if you hear from your ex, you need to hit the ground running about what can be done. Now, let me just give a couple of examples. One example might be that you were in a long-distance relationship and you were dumped because your ex-dumper didn't believe you truly wanted to close that gap. Now, if you want to have a successful long-term relationship, you can't do it long distance. there needs to be an eventual closing of space. And if one person doesn't believe the other is serious about this, they might end the relationship. So something you could do right now, dumpees, if you're in a position of long distance being dumped, is to try to figure out how you could close that gap. How could you theoretically live closer together? Is this something that would mean you would need to change job? Could you continue doing your job remotely? Could you have a transfer? If you were going to do a transfer, could you transfer fairly close to where your ex-partner lives right now? Now, of course, I'm not suggesting you do this now from a position of being dumped. That would be creepy, okay? You can't do it now, but you need to be realizing and recognizing what you can do in the future if you get opportunity. So if you hear from your ex again, you know how to hit the ground running and make suggestions, not necessarily in the first actual conversation, but if things are starting to look better and go in a positive direction, you could then make these suggestions clear about how you can close that gap. Now, another problem which might need solving that I sometimes hear dumpees tell me about is that they were dumped because although they lived quite close together, they lived apart. They didn't live with one another, and their ex-dumper ended the relationship because they never felt that their dumpee would want to live with them. And maybe it was complacency, maybe it was fear, whatever it may have been, the dumpee didn't take the hints about trying to get to the stage of living with one another. Maybe they lived in the same town, but if they didn't live together, then one person lost attraction and they ended the relationship. So in this instance, you need to be trying to consider how could this work. You know, if you were going to live together, would you need a certain amount of funds? Are you financially in a position to buy a house or to rent a house or to share a house with your partner if you were to get back together? Would the bills be split? Was this spoke of before? You can only use the information that you have to hand, but you can think forward about what you could do in the future if you hear from your ex again, if this relationship was going to have that second chance. How could things be different? Focus on solving the problems, because this will put you in the best chance if you hear from your ex again. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast. Please like this video if you're watching on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. And point number 2 is no contact is king. So I often hear from people, yes, I've heard your version of a no contact rule, but it won't work in my instance because my ex is stubborn. It won't work in my situation because my ex has an avoidant attachment style. And what I would say to these people is that from my research, no contact is king. Now look, there is no 100% guaranteed way to get your ex back. Nothing works 100% of the time, and nothing fails 100% of the time. But what I believe is if you implement my version of a no contact rule, you're going to increase your chance of success. And that's what we need to do. Give ourselves better odds. Give ourselves a better chance of achieving our goals, dreams, and aspirations. So if you want to try to get your ex back, from my research, I see no difference whether they have an avoidant attachment style, whether they have an anxious attachment style, or whether they have a secure attachment style. I see similar results across the board, where if you implement no contact, you stand a much better opportunity of getting an ex back than if you don't. Now, if you're not familiar with no contact, then this is something that lots of people suggest you implement if you've been dumped and want to try to get your ex back. However, there are many different versions of a no contact rule that you can find online, and I believe that my version will give you that best possible chance of success. So I suggest that you subscribe to my YouTube channel, ring the bell for notifications, and check out my playlist entitled The No Contact Rule. Here you'll be able to immerse yourself in my version of a rule and understand why I believe it will give you that best possible chance of success. Now listen, whether or not you believe your ex definitely has an avoidant attachment style, or whether you just believe that maybe they're just somebody who is quite stubborn, okay? If you're listening to today's podcast because you think that this resonates in your situation, I do believe that my version of no contact is still the way to go. I can't guarantee you'll get your ex back, but I can guarantee it'll put you in the best possible position. Now, it was only actually today, literally today, before I've recorded today's podcast, I received an email from one of my previous audio coaching clients. I spoke to them a few months ago, and I received an email from them saying that my audio coaching client had heard from their ex 7 months after the breakup. So 7 months after the breakup, they've heard from their ex. Now, this is wonderful news. Now, there's no way of knowing for certain whether or not they will get back together. This is something that only the future will show. But what's important for me to say about this story is that my audio coaching client was very, very wary of me suggesting to implement my version of a no contact rule because they believed that their ex was very stubborn. Okay, so this is a case in point, an example of how even though somebody truly believed their ex was the most stubborn person that they'd ever met potentially, and they just didn't see a scenario where they would receive contact by using my version of a no contact rule. Well, guess what? After 7 months, it's happened. Okay, 7 months post breakup is fairly similar to the average amount of time that I suggest it takes to try and get your ex back by hearing from them again. And that is that most dumpers reach out, from my experience, around the 6-month mark. So it's in and around that area. So here today, I've literally heard somebody say they've received contact from their ex when they really didn't expect it. So please, if you want to try to get your ex back, increase that chance of success, I honestly still believe that no contact is king. Now, if you would like advice and support about how to try to increase the chance of you getting your ex back, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique specific situation. Go to my website, www.dateme.tips, for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast about how to get a stubborn ex back. And point number 3 is respond to their contact. So sometimes people suggest that if they've been dumped, they shouldn't be responding to a message from their ex unless it is quote unquote worthwhile. Meaning, some people believe that they shouldn't respond to a dumper's message unless there is a certain word count or a certain value within what they've been sent. Now, what I would say is that if you don't respond to your ex, you are unfortunately increasing the chance of your relationship not rekindling. And the reason I say this in particular in today's podcast about stubborn exes is that stubborn people are not likely, in my experience or research, to continue to try and hear from you if they reach out. If they reach out to you and you ignore them, in my opinion, there is a strong possibility you will never hear from them again. Now, of course I can't guarantee this, but do you really want to take the risk? If your ex-dumper reaches out to you and they say, "Hi, how are you?" that isn't the longest word count, but it is a question. And this is where I believe that breadcrumbs can be grown. Some people would say it's a tiny message, it's a breadcrumb, don't respond. But no, I honestly believe you can grow breadcrumbs. I believe you can grow the largest tree from the smallest acorn. If you receive, "Hi, how are you?" I'd respond back and put, "Hey, I'm doing great. How have you been recently?" Or something to that effect. Now, depending on your scenario, you might not have a question at all. You might receive contact from your dumper that isn't even asking a question. It might just say something along the lines of, "Just wanted to tell you your favourite movie is on TV tomorrow night." And you might think, why on earth have they sent me that? What relevance is this? I've not heard from them for 9 months. And now they're messaging me my favourite movie is on TV? Who cares? Okay, what's the point? I'm not responding. There's not enough value. I would suggest that you need to respond to that, because it could be your ex sending out an indirect direct approach, which is something where somebody sends a message in a direct way, but they're trying to be indirect about their reasoning. The only reason somebody would message you is if they're thinking about you, if they're missing you, if they're wondering about you, all of those positive things. They're not going to reach out to you for no reason. So if you receive contact about something that doesn't seem particularly important or relevant, they're still reaching out to you. If it's for an unnecessary reason, it must be because they're missing you. So if that was me and I received such contact, I would respond by saying, "Thanks for letting me know. How have you been?" I'd ask them a question even though they didn't ask me one, to try and create that conversation. I would respond. If you don't respond to a stubborn dumper, they're not likely to keep asking you questions. They're not likely to keep sending you messages. What are you waiting for? Somebody who is stubborn, somebody who is avoidant, is not likely to keep going. Maybe you like what they've sent you, maybe you don't. But if you want them back, I strongly suggest that you respond to their message. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.